Hello and welcome to the special edition of We the People. The outrage, the outpouring of anger after the gang rape of a young woman in India's national capital has led many to ask whether this is an opportunity for systemic change, or as the headlines fade, will public anger diminish as well, and will it be back to business as usual? For the next 1 month, this program commits itself to a campaign from across India for systemic change. We promise to focus on what we're calling every woman's battle. We're going to be looking at some of the things that unfortunately we still haven't learned to discuss openly. We'll be looking at issues that range from marital rape to the misogyny of popular culture and how women are depicted, for example, in our cinema, in our songs, and in our advertisements. On the program today, we look at something that is perhaps the toughest for us to talk about. What happens when sexual violence and sexual abuse takes place within what was considered a circle of trust? What if a rape takes place in a marriage? What about so many of us who have grown up with the experience of a relative, a friend of the family, having abused us sexually when we were little children? Why was it so difficult for us to tell our parents? And how did they react? Did they react in a sensitive or appropriate way? While we focus on better law enforcement and safer cities, what happens when the enemy is right inside our homes? I want to start with Priya Dutt. Priya, as a lawmaker, as I must say, one of the few members of parliament of your party who spoke when the rest of your party was unfortunately silent, I want to ask you to share your thoughts on the fact that we now do have finally a law that pertains to sexual assault tabled in the Lok Sabha. It's come after 7 years of delay, which many people believe points to how this was never a priority for our lawmakers. But it still does not recognize issues that we find very difficult to talk about as a society. And this somehow still seems to be a bit of a holy cow. So while this present law does say that if a woman is under 18, for example, then there is recognition of sexual abuse. But the moment she's above 18, our law is silent on marital rape. Do you feel it's time to take the lid off this so far taboo subject, as it were, almost?
I think so, and I completely agree with you. This is a matter which, even as a member of parliament, I've been speaking of from day one. The problem is that we are moving ahead in time, but unfortunately our laws are not keeping pace with that progress. 50 years back, we didn't have television, we didn't have mobile phone, we didn't have internet. With all that comes added problems as well, but we have not been able to keep pace with that.
So do you feel the law should recognize marital rape?
Of course it has to recognize, and especially when you're talking about marital rape or you're talking about child abuse within families itself. Sex in itself is such a taboo subject even today within families. A mother cannot speak to her daughter about good touch or bad touch.
Yeah.
We don't introduce that in our schools, which we must.
So you believe it is time for the law to turn its attention on marital rape,
Definitely.
to acknowledge that it exists, and a statistic of a survey by a Washington-based group is actually worth taking note of. They found that 1 in every 5 Indian men had confessed to forcing his partner to having had sex with him at one point or the other. Also, in more than 90% of the cases, the woman who has been in the receiving hands of sexual violence actually knows her abuser. So are we really focusing on the issues that matter? Let me get a police officer's perspective here. Himanshu Roy, one of the things, and we're going to be hearing from women in this show who have suffered this personally, one of the things that happens to women is that it's tough enough to file an FIR anyway. There is social stigma, there is a gender insensitivity of the police. But if you walk into a police station and you want to say, my husband, the man I was married to, has raped me, because of the ambiguity of the law, because the law just doesn't recognize this, because even under the Domestic Violence Act it's treated as a civil offense and not a criminal offense, that woman actually doesn't know where to go. And she would think 1,000 times before walking into a police station to file an FIR. What does the police do when you get a complaint that specifically pertains to sexual abuse in the home?
You're absolutely right. Our law does not recognize marital rape if the woman is over 16 years of age.
Yeah.
So there is an issue here that if a woman of more than 15 is forced to have sexual intercourse by her husband, there is no provision in law by which he can be punished. However, if the act is accompanied by violence, if the act is accompanied by threat, he can be booked under those sections. but not the main section and the main issue which we are talking about. The law is not ambiguous at all. The law is clear that he cannot be punished.
So at the moment it's not ambiguous, it just doesn't recognize.
Clear, it does not recognize marital rape for
in other
a
words,
woman
a man
who's more
can
than
beat
15
up his
years
wife,
old.
assault her, sexually abuse her, and not be punished for it if she's over 16 at the moment,
He
over
cannot,
15
he
under the
cannot,
present law.
he cannot
15.
assault her. He cannot assault her. He cannot threaten her.
So
Be
what would a
punished.
police officer do when a woman walks into the police station?
Before I answer that, let me give you a very interesting statistic. Last year in Mumbai, we had 230 rapes registered. Out of this, 92% of the cases, the victim was known to the accused. In more than 31% of the cases, it is a relative. So there is a serious issue out here that we are dealing with. As far as the police is concerned and as far as registration of FIRs is concerned, I think we are fairly sensitive about registration of FIRs. We insist that it is registered by a woman police officer. Normally, in fact, in all our cases, the investigating officer is also a woman police officer. And we are going in for even better rape investigation protocols with the help of NGOs.
But at the moment, the law itself is silent. Anand Grover, you have a lawmaker here. Priya Dutt here is saying it's time to recognize marital rape. The fact of the matter is that it's taken even much of the world time to catch up with this. Even in countries like the United Kingdom, it was only recognized in the 90s. Now, if you look at ourselves as a deeply misogynistic culture, a culture where we kill girls before they're born, a culture where we say, may you be the mother of 100 sons. In this deeply misogynistic society, will we as a people be ready to look at marital rape?
You know, the notion that marital rape is not a crime is based on the fact, and this is brought from English law, that when a woman marries a man, she consents to have sex anytime. So therefore, there can be sex without consent in marriage. Now, the women's movement and progressive legal groups recognize this to be a very bad thing, and it was suggested to Parliament before the sexual assault bill came that marital rape should be recognized as a crime. Unfortunately, our parliamentarians are mostly men. They do not recognize equality of women in society. And the major problem, I'm glad that you're addressing it, that it's the home and the sanctified relationship of a man and a woman in a marriage. There is inequality built in the marital rape which occurs, which is not recognized. And I think it's fundamental that if you want to solve this problem in the long term, you must recognize marital rape as a criminal offense.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.